Go ahead and start our recording again and get started and welcome everyone to the call. I see a couple new faces, so we will introduce ourselves. I am Lori Baker. I am the President and CEO of the Association for Individual Development. Jim, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Jim. I serve on the board of AID and have a son who receives services and lives in a group home in Elgin.
Bob?
My name is Bob Shanaha. My wife Mary and I have a daughter Maria, who is 32 and receives home services. So
Great. Sue?
Short and sweet of it is that Jim is my ex-husband. He is remarried. I am not. So his story is my story.
You have the same son.
Who is 30 today. Happy birthday.
Yay, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy Mother and Father's Day to you both. Hannah and Caleb.
Hi, we're happy to be with you all tonight. Like you're probably better to introduce.
Yeah, my sister is in an AID home. There's recently a transfer of guardianship, so now I'm her guardian. So this is our first meeting.
Hey, well, welcome. It's great to have you. So
Thank you.
Yeah, we've Abby's, or I guess we should say, has been in an Elgin group home for probably since 2018, maybe 2018, and so we're familiar tangentially to the organization, but we're really excited to learn more, and just think it's a wonderful service that Abby receives.
Great. So glad that you joined us. How did you find out about the meeting? We keep trying to get information out, and you can see that there aren't a ton of people on here. So
we saw it on the website. I think we signed up for
the newsletter.
We signed up for the newsletter. I think the newsletter had the calendar.
Great.
Cool.
I'm glad. We're trying all different kinds of ways. We also have a private Facebook page that is like this AID Family Council. So if you're if you do Facebook and you're interested in being on that private Facebook group, it's again fairly newish, and we're not super active, and we're trying to figure out ways to get more people on there and what all information we would share on there. But let us know, and we can invite you. Jim or I, either one, can invite you to become members of that if you want.
Great. And then we live in Chicago, and we have ourselves a 1-year-old daughter.
Oh, nice. Nice. Laura?
Hi, thank you for having me be with you tonight. I'm Laura Anderson. I am the CEO of Winning Systems, which is a provider of support and advocacy for nonprofits, and close to my heart, AID and Lori, and we work on policy together and advocate for all of you. And it's an honor to do so. And I have a son who is turning 30 in 2 weeks, and going through this existential crisis of what have I done with my life. And I have a 27-year-old and a 25-year-old. So
when my son turned 30, it wasn't really like what I did with my life. It was just like, well, I can't have a child who's 30 because I'm not even 30. How is that possible?
Right?
Because in my mind,
know how that happened.
In my mind, I don't feel like I'm that old, but I definitely am that old in my body. Kathy Hoyda, are you able to introduce yourself?
Yes.
I didn't know if you were still in your meeting or if you were.
No, yeah, I raced home and got a lot of good answers. I have a son who's almost 30 this year, and he's in a group home down in Yorkville, and we advocate like crazy for him. And a daughter who's over in Cincinnati earning her PhD in neuroscience.
Oh, how interesting. Wow. Stephanie? Are you there, Stephanie? Oh yeah, there she is.
Hi. Yeah, I'm my lighting's a little creepy, so I had my camera off. But But I am Stephanie Norwood, and my title is VP of IDD Services. So I head up AID's residential services as well as our clinical services. And I have a 6-year-old daughter who is in kindergarten.
I guess I should share, and Stephanie is waiting to go present to a funder at 8:30 tonight. So
Yeah, I'm sitting outside of the American Legion Hall in Geneva.
in her car, which is why it's dark. You're fine to leave off your camera if you want to, Stephanie. Thank you.
Right.
I thought that was your new goth look, Stephanie.
So I guess I should say my son is 36 and lives in Decatur with my daughter-in-law and my grandpuppy. So that is my child as well, since we all were sharing stuff about our kids. So tonight our topic is about advocacy, and wow, I just we have had a really roller coaster bumpy 2 weeks or so. Any of you that kind of have been around and seen some of the things know that the Division of Developmental Disabilities has been working along with the Department of Human Services and legislators to institute the rate recommendations that were created in a study that was called the Guidehouse Rate Study, that started pre-COVID and was kind of slowed down a bit by COVID, but has resulted in increased funding over the last few years for developmental disability services. And January 1st of this year was supposed to be the kickoff of a large set of rate increases that covered a variety of areas. So they covered things like nursing and benefits costs and for staff and administration and program supports and some other areas that you may not always hear or think about, but that that providers have never been reimbursed at what the cost it is that it takes us to provide it. So for instance, we were paying nurses more than $30 an hour, and we would get reimbursed something like 15, 22 or something like that an hour, right? So you always have to make up the difference. And all of those things that I mentioned were kind of in that category, right? The second thing that it was implementing was $1 an hour rate increase for direct support professionals outside of Cook and the Collier counties. And within Cook and the Collier counties, it was a $3.55 an hour increase. Now, when we say that, that doesn't mean that all of that money goes to the DSP, but a vast majority of it was slated to go to those DSPs or direct support professionals. And all of that is attempting to get towards the recommendation, which in Guidehouse, which recommends paying direct support professionals 1.5 times more than what state minimum wage is. Also, you know, that regionalization factor, that higher amount for Cook and the Collier counties was to take into effect the higher minimum wage that is in Cook County that people can go work for. And so on February 8th, we were all invited across the state, all the providers, to a webinar that the Division of Developmental Disabilities put on to explain how the new rate methodology worked. And within that presentation, they announced the reduction or cut of 3,762,698 direct support professional hours from the system across the state.
Wow.
Yes, I said 3 million, 3.76 million hours. With the new rate calculator, they put into effect a new funding formula, which takes into account the ICAP score, which is a assessment of a person's abilities and needs, right? As well as a health score from a new health risk screening tool that has been being used for, the last year or so, I think, that has 6 different categories of health need or health support that people have from 1, which is very little health need, to 6, which is a really high level of health care support need. Somehow, in the implementation of this formula, it reduced the amount of hours that providers would be paid for, and that consumers would receive by that 3.7 million hours. Now remember, because of the increase in the actual amount per hour, all providers still received an increase, right? Because of all those different hours and all those different categories where they added the money towards what we really spend for a nurse, for benefits, for administration. So while it looks good on paper that you're receiving potentially a lot more money, the end result is a reduction in hours for the people that need, unfortunately, the most support is kind of how it shook out. At AID, we had 159 people that we support in SILA settings, and 151 of them saw a reduction in their hours. And 8 of them saw an increase in their hours, and many of those 8 are some of our least, are some people that are least in need of additional hours, do not have a need for more hours than they were already receiving in our estimation. So this has been a huge blow to the developmental disability system. There's been frantic advocacy of the trade associations, and Laura's been very involved in that, as well as to the governor's office, to the Secretary of the Department of Human Services, to the Division of Developmental Disabilities. That has kind of been going back and forth over the last couple of weeks. I'm going to pause for a second and see if Laura wants to add anything, and then if you have any questions. Laura, yeah.
So I've been doing this 37 years. And Lori has been doing it less because she's younger. But I honestly, there have been 2 times in the last 20 years of mine doing exclusively advocacy for people with disabilities that I drove back from Springfield in tears, right? Like I was frustrated, I was angry, I felt like we weren't being heard. So that's not too bad, right? Like, twice this is the worst thing I've ever seen. And I'm going to give credit to somebody else about this analogy, but it was just so vivid for me. I'm kind of a visual person. And we were, a colleague of Lori's and mine were talking to the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. When these decisions are made, generally speaking, you have the Department of Human Services, who is led by Secretary Grace Ho in this case. You know, it's like the Department of Human Services has all of these departments. I'm going to give you like a how a bill becomes a law, sort of, you know, without the fun music. You know, I still hear that in my head, by the way. Anyway, but DHS covers Department of Developmental Disabilities, Department of Mental Health, Department of Children and Family Services. So there's different departments that are under DHS and Secretary Ho. And then you have the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. It's their job to produce a budget. And, you know, even though Illinois is a legislative driven budget, it's governor proposed, right? Our Constitution requires our governor to propose it. The General Assembly generally, almost nearly 100% of the time, doesn't accept it as is. And then it's, you know, between the Governor's Office of Management and Budget to make sure that it's implemented and things are happening and proposing. So that's their job. And then you have HFS, Healthcare and Family Services, which is Medicaid and handles, you know, kind of the payments, but not the programs of DHS. So that's a simple thing. It's not to get into the weeds, but why that's important to tell you this is there was a utter breakdown in my view of who's on first and what's on second. You ever see that skit with Abbott and Costello? Mm-hmm. That's what we've been dealing with. You know, you have the Department of Human Services, you know, developmental disability that is, you know, trying to implement Guidehouse. And then you have the Governor's Office of Management and Budget that's saying, you know, what's it going to cost? How is it going to work? You know, they're the money people. And clearly they did not work together or figure this out together, because when we were meeting with Lori's and my colleague, myself, yesterday with the Governor's Office's Management and Budget say, oh, we were surprised that this happened. How can the budget office be surprised when you're cutting 3.8 million hours out of a system that has been frail, and we have advocated for years for more funding, and you just put more money into state ops since the fall, and you didn't know that this was going to be a solution to, by the way, an admitted mistake of implementing the Guidehouse rate study that Lori was talking about. I mean, it was like, are we in a Abbott and Costello movie? Or as our colleague said yesterday to Gambi, that's what we call them, Governor's Office of Management and Budget. The acronym is GOMB. So what we said to Gambi was, we've been telling you since before COVID that we have a staffing problem, that we don't have enough staff, that we need to work this out, that we can't be competitive, that people are leaving the field because they can get a job at McDonald's, when the jobs that we have care for people, and we're not paying them enough to care for people. And you know, I mean, you don't know you didn't know this was going to happen. You didn't know this was going on. So anyway, her analogy was, we've been telling you for years, we've told you that the house is on fire and that things are burning. And we're trying to figure out how to get people in and out of this burning building safely. And you just, with this action, told us that we no longer have firefighters. And I thought it was good for me, you know, and he had like a light bulb go off. So it was a very helpful analogy. I've never seen anything like it, because we do have a system that needs more investment. And our state philosophically says community programs are a priority. And yet since September, right, Lori, this is the third investment in SODCs. The first two was one in October for staffing crisis, which we said, yep, us too. But we didn't get a special investment. And then during lame duck session, they got 32 SODCs, state operated developmental centers, got about $30 million for capital and for operations. And we fought for $12.5 million. And then this fiscal year proposal was more money for SODCs for employees. So, you know, you see what's going on and you hear what you're being told, but it's not matching. So, you know, I'm very concerned. Our colleagues are very concerned. Lori is very active, just so you know. I'm going to say this for you, Lori, because you won't. But, you know, Lori has great relationships for all the work that she's done in this field and in advocacy her whole entire adult career. And so these relationships are important to have, as you know. And they told Lori what they could tell her, and it wasn't good. And, you know, now we have to make sure that they hear us. And legislators are going to start asking questions because the cat's out of the bag, as it were, in the last, 5 days, pretty much, Lori, wouldn't you say? That I think the state agencies really didn't want too many people to know. And I'm sure we're trying to figure out a way that they could maybe fix the problem, but I don't think it's going to work without having the legislature involved.
Laura, can I ask where the court that is overseeing Legos is in all of this? Because they were the ones who ordered the guidehouse rate study, and they're the ones who are forcing the state to move toward compliance with the settlement. So don't they have some clout in terms of directing the state on something like this?
That's a great question, and I think super insightful, because the court scheduled their next briefing to be June 29th of 2023, right? So the state of Illinois went to them, it was last fall, I think, or summer. It was right after the budget, the new fiscal year, I think. I can't remember the exact date, Jim, but the court advocate, you know, Ronnie Cohn and some of the others were there, as well as the state. And the state said, we've been doing what you asked us, Judge, to, you know, we did Guidehouse and we're implementing Guidehouse, and we want you to release us from the Ligas decree. And the judge said, yeah, no, too soon for that action. See you next June. So they don't have to go back until next June. However, the court monitor, Ronnie Cohn, one of them, she actually participated in the webinar last week at the invitation of Lori and other colleagues who said, we think something's going on, you should probably pay attention. And she joined the webinar. Trust me, she didn't have anything good to say from what I've heard. I didn't speak to her personally. I know that she was very upset about it. She will brief the court. I think we have to see, Jim, whether or not they will ask for a special hearing. Or, I mean, because they could do that, right, Lori? She can ask for an immediate hearing or a special hearing so we'll see if things, you know, the department and Gombe are all trying to buy a little time to try and fix it. But the ultimate thing here is, yes, the state ordered the guidehouse study at the request of the court. And frankly, because Illinois has been in non-compliance for so long, they needed to figure out what to do, right? I mean, Lori and her colleagues could have told them in 5 minutes what to do, but, you know, let's do a study for 2 years and then wait until after COVID to present it. Anyway, sorry, little bitter. It's been a long couple of days, but I think what's been going on really does justify a special hearing. So I think we can anticipate that may be a possibility. But I think we're all trying to be decent to each other and give them a chance. But, you know, it's starting to sort of come out that the problem really began with an inaccuracy in the estimated cost of implementing Guidehouse. Here's the thing though. Did you think it wasn't going to cost a lot of money?
Yeah.
You haven't invested in the system for over a decade.
Yeah.
You thought it was going to be what? Less than the pension debt? So, you know, here's what I say to legislators. I know it's about revenue. I know it's about appropriations, but to me, it's about priorities. And it should be to you. And we need to hold their feet to the fire because it is about priorities. Enough of this. Enough of this. You are good people. You do good things. We couldn't do what you do. You're so wonderful. What great hearts. You know what? It's more than that.
So is your sense, Laura, sorry to interrupt, is your sense that the state is sort of saying, oh crap, we really screwed up, but we're going to fix it? Or have they kind of doubled down on, hey, you know, sucks to be you guys. This is the way it is.
I love that question because it's almost like you've seen this story before. So you wondered if they were going to double down again. I would say that it's starting to come around. I would say that they started with a double down and then they got exposed. Is that fair, Lori?
Yeah, I would agree.
I think they really were hoping that it wasn't as bad as they thought and that they could, you know, go to the community and say, okay, calm down. It's all good. We're going to take care of it. It's going to be fine. And then they actually realized that it was really a big, expensive mistake that they made, like $100 million plus mistake. And so to fix that, it's not going to be able to be done easily. But a whole bunch of us have been talking to each other, all of us that are doing this every day. And one thing is for sure, Jim, they're not going to be able to double down on denial because it's a real problem and we should not be punished for their mistake.
So how can we as parent advocates be involved, particularly with things like how can we get the word out, like on platforms like iPad Unite that most of us are members of? I haven't seen anything on iPad about this, and that's a major voice in terms of you know,
I'm on iPad too. I watch it too, Jim. But I'm going to leave that to Lori.
Yeah,
Lori,
I was just going to say, I dropped in the chat a document that was created by Kathy Carmody from the Institute, which really, as simply as possible in 2 pages, explains the progression of this debacle. That went out this morning. Laura and her colleagues sent that to all legislators because Jim, everybody's been slightly everybody's been trying to give opportunity and not blow up the world for the governor and the Department of Human Services, giving them the opportunity to fix things, right, to make things better, to find any glitch that there might be, etc. And it's been more evident that because it is such a large mistake, right, in terms of dollars, that the dollars are not appropriated. And in the state of Illinois, if the dollars are not appropriated in the budget, you can't spend them, right? So it's going to take probably some legislative action to fix this, and some political will to fix it. This is the beginning. I sent out email with this to our board members today for AID. This is the next step in us talking to our family council. I was glad this happened to be the night that we were talking about advocacy, and we didn't have to take over any other subject that was already on the calendar. I will give a brief update in that today, this afternoon, the Department of Human Services put out a letter indicating that they were going to make adjusted payments for the next 3 months, which actually means the last 3 months, January, February, and March, and pay at the DSP hour levels that were in effect in December of 2022. We believe that means at the higher rate. It doesn't explicitly say that, but once they've changed anything in their online system, it takes a lot to make it any different. So we believe that'll be it. And then it says that they are going to be continuing to implement the Guidehouse rate calculator in partnership with us as a part of a comprehensive multi-year effort to strengthen the intellectual and developmental disabilities community. They will be in further communication regarding the Guidehouse Scylla rate calculator as they work to ensure the most seamless implementation possible. So I believe that we are reading that to be hopeful that they will work with the community to ensure that the calculator is implemented in a way that doesn't do harm to the persons being served within the community. But it doesn't explicitly say that, but we believe that's the intent. So this felt like the beginning of a move towards something more positive coming out of this. But this is still a huge issue. You all know, already that you don't get as much service and support as you want, right? For AID, the amount of hours that we were cut were 53,090 hours. So that is 25 and a half full-time employees if we counted it up like that. Obviously, we are not going to change our staffing patterns, which means that you spend the money that you're getting for other things on wages. We're trying to figure out how we can do the increases that we would like to and need to ensure are implemented, right? Based on the recommendations and the higher pay per hour that is included in this. But a higher pay per hour with less hours still doesn't allow you to pay everybody, right? The funds that you need to. So I think everyone in the system has been very respectful and trying not to, the webinar was on the 8th of February. The next Wednesday was the governor's budget address, and we could have made that very uncomfortable for everyone, right? If all of us would have pulled out the stops and gone and advocated at the Capitol in a large group of thousands of people, right? But you know, everyone was trying to be, I believe, very respectful, believing that this wasn't intentionally done to take away, you know, wasn't maliciously done to take away that many hours. You know, unfortunately, I hate to even say this out loud, but you know, even the Division of Developmental Disabilities didn't seem to understand, you know, how the formula was working, and that ended up, you know, reducing this amount of hours. So we were, you know, working with them, meeting with people, and by we, I don't mean me, but like, you know, collectively the system and the trade associations and that. So that's why you haven't heard, you know, much of anything about this, but, you know, these negotiations have been ongoing. You know, things may have had a little bit of a positive spin this afternoon, but you know, 3 months that 2 of them are over with, you know, is not a fix make, right? So it's a good start towards something, but you know, believe that it's time that all of you understand, you know, what this will mean, to be able to tell your legislators individually what it would mean for your loved one to not receive the care that and hours of support that they need within their setting within their home, right? Other questions? Thoughts?
So do we go to our legislators and, like I've always done, but I now have 2 new ones to hit up, and explain our personal situation? And if they just got this, remind them to read it. You know, what's our next step? I was going to go and meet and talk to these people anyway, but what else can we do? Or they've got to hear us eventually, but
yeah, I think
Go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that's a good step, Kathy. I mean, like everybody did get this in their inbox today, right? With an introductory email. I've been trying to also then respond to people that we have relationships with and say, you know, hey, you got this today. This is really important for you to take a look at. This is a really potentially catastrophic, you know, issue. And you know, 2 pages of you know, densely typed script is not usually what they like to read, right?
Right.
But it is a very complex situation, and this is a very thorough and simple you know, step-by-step flow of how everything has happened. So I would take this and you know, say this is incredibly important. This is what it would mean, you know, to our family, and we want you to fix it.
good. Guess Matthew's got some outings he's going to have soon.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I got a sense from, I talked to a legislator very late today, and her response to me was, oh, I heard they got it handled. So, you know, I'm not going to participate in a call tomorrow. I heard they got it handled. And I said, no. They sent a message to say, we're going to continue doing, you know, these things until the end of March. That's not, to me, handled. That is a placeholder. That is a don't hit the panic button, you know, kind of move. I think it is really important for, you know what, they expect to hear from me. They expect to hear from Lori. They expect to hear from certain people, right? Because we go to the meetings and we're, we're part of the big picture advocacy. And we provide them, like Lori provides our legislators, where we provide service for AID, really important statistics and understanding of what happens every day. But the General Assembly as a whole, and then the budget staff who are behind the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz, they need to hear from you, mean more than I could ever do, because, this is your family. And legislators react differently to constituents. And that's who you are and why your voice is so important. It's so, yeah, I can sit there and go through the statistics and tell them, get in the weeds on all the details, but how it really affects people, it is why your voice is so important. Super important.
If legislative action is needed to reverse this, if they can't figure it out behind the scenes, is that started in the House or the Senate? Like if we were to approach our local,
it can start in either. It depends, it's like, would they put an amendment on a bill that's already there, or is it a policy change? My guess is it's probably going to take different things. It's going to take a budget, probably potentially a budget supplemental, and that can start in either place, House or Senate. So, you want to talk to your individual legislators, and then you want to talk to the ones that are sitting on the appropriate committees, which is Human Services Appropriations in the Senate and the same in the House. So those are important people in the process.
And as things continue, I am sure that there will be things like you often see if you get AID, like Friday Focus and our constant contact information, right, where we will ask you to take an action, like send an email or be in support of legislation or be in opposition to legislation. I think, everybody, all providers and advocacy groups have really kind of, like I said, been really respectful of the process and trying to, allow time for, action to be taken, and it have kind of been to the point now that it's okay, like we've got to start getting the information out and helping people to understand. So that very thing that Laura just said about, somebody going, oh, it's all taken care of, doesn't, isn't the message that everyone is hearing, that they're hearing from their constituents, that it isn't. So you can, email your legislator with this document. You can take it into their office. You can send it to them or drop it by their office, or sign it with a hand, little note saying this would be horrible for, my brother, our loved one, our child, but we need you to take care of it. You don't have to have the answers for what that is. That's their job, right? To figure out, and then also be on the lookout for some future information from us. They Deserve More is looking at this. Obviously all the trade associations, the Institute, the ARC of Illinois, IR, so I am sure that we will have some kind of bigger, just like we did for lame duck session, where we were advocating for funding. There would be, the opportunities, I believe, to be involved in some larger scale actions, like, send an email to your legislator by clicking this link kind of thing, right? As well as more concerted efforts. Who knows? I mean, it may end up that we, take an advocacy day to Springfield, or do something for people that are able. It just kind of depends upon how things roll out. But more than anything, we're trying to start to get information to people, so you can have some understanding of what is happening, begin to process this, because I'm telling you, it's taken me like these 2 weeks and more of like thinking about this constantly, trying to figure out, what's the best course of action? What do we do? Because of course, we can say, that we have not delivered all the hours that we get paid for, right? Because we have a workforce crisis and we have 45 openings, right, in our residential setting. And so I kind of struggled back and forth with what that meant, but those hours help pay for the additional cost of keeping people as safe as we can and secure by having staff work overtime, by having exempt staff who get paid stipends on top of their salary to work shifts when they have to do that, and they end up working 12 and 14 and 16 hours a day in order to continue. And the bottom line is that these are hours that your loved one needs and deserves in order to comply with the home and community-based settings regulation, in order to be out in the community doing the things that they want to, in order for us to comply with LEGIS, in order for us to assist moving people out of state operated developmental centers, of which we have 7 in the state of Illinois. And if you've been reading the paper at all, Choate ain't a place you want to be, right? There are 6 more of them. I would say the others have not been as much in the limelight, but believe me, there's been stuff that has happened at all of them, that has not been, the best. And it's not the best place for anyone to be, is in a large institutional setting away from the community. I don't know if you've ever been to any of them, but I've been to all 7 of them, and they are very much like The Shining, like they're their own little village, down a tree-lined lane, like they were state of the art at one point, right? But
I think of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Laura, I've got a question on that maybe you can answer. I know under the Quinn administration, there was some movement towards shuttering all of the SODCs, but that political will seems to have totally evaporated. What can and is being done to really force the state to once and for all shut these places down and redistribute that money back into the community care system?
Oh, Jim, this is like the $108 million question. And I use that oddly specific number because that's what they're telling us this mistake is costing. But, it's super complicated, and I don't want to give you government mumbo jumbo. So I'm going to be as direct as I can without being too direct. The political will stopped because Murray, when they tried to close Murray, they did Lincoln, then they did Jacksonville, and then they were going to close Murray, and there was a court order to stop it. Parents went, but it wasn't, as we find out later, just parents, right? There's parties in addition to families that have a vested interest in keeping those facilities open.
So I will say it if Laura won't. It's a political issue, and there are thousands of union members that work at state-operated developmental centers. So it's a AFSCME.
Now that I know you'll say it, I'm happy to say it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've always known that. It's just like, at what point does the governor or the legislature just say, too bad, right? We're going to close these things. Other states have done that.
And I don't want to be partisan or political because it's not. But not this governor and not this time. Is that gonna be the answer? And it's unfortunate because really it's doing a disservice to people, and the people that are not being served well are the ones we all, political people always say, the ones they care about the most, and yet the actions that they're taking is hurting those people the most. There were men that I met that were in Jacksonville their whole entire life. It was a different time, right? I'm not judging anyone who I'm just not judging anyone. But it was a different time when these men that I met that were in their 60s then were moved out of Jacksonville in a community setting. And they were so happy to have a fishing pole and their own bed and a closet and a dresser. I left that tour. It was better than Christmas to meet people that were so happy to have their own things. And that's what we're keeping from people, right? I'm not saying that there aren't some people that need greater supports, but there are a lot of people who could live in the community and aren't because of this political garbage. So I think there's been a deal to keep the SODCs going because there's been a lot of investment lately. But I think, it's the political, but there's also an expense, Jim, to closing a facility. So I think, Lori, wasn't it like 17 to $20 million to close a facility back in the day? It's probably more now. And they don't see savings for at least 2 fiscal years. So you really have to want to do it, Jim, to do it.
Because you don't get to reduce the costs until a unit is totally closed down. So you still have to have all the staff, still have to have electricity, power. Well, electricity is power, but heat and all those things. I mean, the thing that I remember most, because I was I worked for state government whenever we were closed in Jacksonville. And I participated in that a little bit, is that and we're starting on Murray until the injunction, but in Jacksonville, there were less than 200 people. I think it was about 185 people, or was it 285? I can't remember. When they began to close, and it cost $1 million a year just for the coal to fire the power plant that ran Jacksonville's, because it's its own little town. So that that many, it was a handful of people, $1 million a year just for the coal. And that doesn't stop until not one single person lives there, right? So that's just one of the examples. And so it is a big investment up front, and then you won't get any return for several years, plus having the heartache of displacing people. And to be fair, this is the same issue that happens in rural communities around corrections facilities. Right. These are the only living wage jobs in 100 miles for many people.
And that's really what Murray was, and Jacksonville to a lot of degrees. And what Lori's talking about is it's built into the economy of that region. And if you closed a prison in Western Illinois, the entire, region would be shuttered. And so there's just so many layers of it. But the former HFS director a few years back said to me, it used to be that closing the state-operated developmental centers were on the back burner, because of Murray and everything. People just were like, forget it. Oh my gosh. She said, but if you really want more money in the community, you've got to close them, because that's where the money is. And the laws that we passed require that money to be reinvested in the community system. They are not supposed to pull a lottery and say, oh yeah, okay, you got a little money here, where we're going to take out the money there. It's actually supposed to be new money when you get to it. It's hard decisions, it's political decisions, it's a lot of personal decisions. But Lori, you and I've talked about this. There are probably a couple of state-operated facilities in Chicago that could be closed / merged if necessary, so that you wouldn't have to go to the rural settings.
Well, and I think there
right away.
There are some there have been some efforts to talk about what repurposing or good use of a SODC could you use. So for example, We've had some good luck with folks that need a complete med wash. There's nowhere in the public system, no hospital can you check in and not leave for 30+ days, right? In order to titrate down all your medications, really look at what do you have the right diagnoses, and then what is the best medication regime for you, and then start that back up. Because they have doctors and nurses and psychiatrists and behavioralists on the site, and SODC might be an excellent place for that. Short-term or long-term stabilization home, right? I mean, maybe that is something you could do so that you could use some of them in a positive way to fill in a gap in the public, in the public system, not the governmental system, and be able to kind of work around some of that, close a few, right? And then still use a couple of them and maybe be able to do some of that. I will say I'm on the Arc of Illinois board, and they just sent out an email from the Going Home Coalition this evening that is calling for Governor Pritzker to close Choate and to make a commitment to do that. And they are going to send that out tomorrow, looking for sign-on supporters. So organizations and individuals that are interested in signing that before it gets sent to the governor's office. There was a press conference today or yesterday that was about today's Thursday, right? It was today,
Yes.
this morning, about it's like lost track of what day it is. But where a group of legislators called for a bicameral committee to investigate and look into all this stuff. Everyone from the Department of Justice to the Office of the Inspector General to the police have investigated Choate for the past, I don't know, 20 years, maybe. If those aren't good enough, how is a bicameral, group of legislators,
Who don't know what they're supposed to be looking at. Yeah.
right, gonna investigate anymore? I mean, like they've been under order to implement change, right? For years. So anyway, that's just kind of one of those spins, right? That they're trying to get people around them to feel like they're taking action when in reality they really want to keep SODCs open and operating as a business in their community.
Yep.
It's really complicated. Nothing is ever easy.
But what you do, I have to go back to that but what you do is tell legislators, policymakers, how it affects your family, how it affects your son or your daughter, or your sister, your brother, to not have consistent care, to not have, a community organization like AID, be able to support your family member, because that's sometimes in this process, legislators and staff, they're hugely, guilty of this, just looking at the numbers and, oh my gosh, this is $108 million worth of, yeah, but it's 1,800 employees over the state, that's economics too. And more importantly, these are the service supports that someone is worthy of and should have. And so we really need to keep the human side of this first. And that's
Laura and Lori, when the legislature sets up a committee to say investigate something like the SODCs, how much do policymakers look at what other states have done? I mean, there's something like 17 or 20 states that have zeroed out their institutions over the last years. So if other states can do it, they also face the, we've got big employers in rural communities problem. So why are we trying to invent the wheel? How much do policymakers look at experience in other states that might be replicable in Illinois?
They always say they want to, and those exact arguments have been used at every hearing that I've ever been at, that we talk about the SODCs and the need to close. So far it hasn't made anything happen, but legislators are always like, well, what does someone around us do? What does Kentucky do? What does Indiana do? What does Iowa
Michigan.
do?
Yeah.
Except for when it's something they don't want to do, I guess.
I guess the political will has to come first, and then you look at Michigan or Kentucky to figure out, so now that we're committed to doing it, how did they do it, and what ideas can we steal? Yeah.
And I always hear legislators say, well, how come Michigan doesn't have a wait list? Right. So ask the staff to investigate that. Why is that the case? I think the intention is there, but the hard decisions are that Illinois is a very unique state. I mean, more than most. There's some really complicated politics that drive some of these things. But you're right. Why reinvent the wheel? I mean, by the way, I worked for the General Assembly when we brought SILAs back from Colorado. That's where we saw them. And at that time, I remember going there and going to a SILA, and I was like, well, this is really cool. We should have these. And I'm like, so you're going to show us an institution? They're like, well, we don't have those. This was in 1989, by the way. And I'm like, and I was with someone who'd been in human services in Illinois, and they go, well, where do you put all the people? And I thought, oh my God. But I mean, it was the first time I saw a SILA, and it was in 1990 that we passed legislation that money follows the person, so that SILAs could exist here. I'm old, and that's one really great example of not reinventing the wheel, but bringing something super smart here, right? We just need to commit to it, Jim, fully.
We, as in the
Illinois.
state, yes. It's honestly, I struggled to grasp all of this. I got the general, but I'm trying to figure out why, in terms of being a major employer, if you were to disband SODCs and move to the home-based, community-based model, would those people not still have employment? It would be a different setting, but it would be employment. I'm sure that's a very naive, unrealistic,
that's the way I think about it too. I am always like, well, let's start a training program and they can move into community-based settings. The reality is we don't pay as good or have as good a retirement or have as good a benefits.
But the state is still pumping the money into the SODC, and if they weren't doing that, then it would be available for the community base.
And that, by the way, why it costs about $400,000 a year to care for somebody in an SODC.
Right. And what really, on an emotional level, what really frustrates me as well is, I hear what you're saying. There's union activity, but in terms of family activity, I feel like, well, now what am I saying to these other families, well, my needs are greater than your needs? It's pitting us against each other. It just feels like, even economically, saying, well, your person is in an SODC and it's taking money away from my community-based, and that's not fair. And that's dumb, because we're all in the same boat. I understand there's varying levels and degrees and stuff, but it just feels like,
I don't think, Sue, that it has to be you against another family, because you're not advocating that family not receive anything, right?
Right, exactly. But it feels a bit like that when there's a tug of war for the funds, and I'm listening to, oh, we're pumping this into SODC, and my kid is over here, please, can you go out into the community? Please, can you go, Can you get a job coach? Can you be,
Yeah.
please?
And the thing that they fairly say all the time is that there's not capacity in the community, right? And there's not, because we don't have, again, that takes that investment of upfront money, right, in order to pay people to be competitive with the SODC to come
right.
work for you, as well as to be able to meet all the needs. So it's super complicated. And you know, the thing that's most about it, and I am not anti-union by any stretch of the imagination. I grew up in a union household, but you know, in Illinois, our unions, our AFSCME union like that, gives a lot of money to political campaigns, and they work a lot of political campaigns. So they give staff people that they go out and do work for you as a politician to get you reelected. And we can't compete with that at the community level because we don't have a PAC. And we, you know, even if we did, we couldn't compete with the money that they are able to raise. So so it's, you know, super complicated, but we've kind of gone down this like rabbit hole here of SODC stuff. I just want to make sure that you know that you feel like you understand what is happening to the best of your ability. You've got the tool at this moment, and that you will be looking at your you know, emails as they are coming in order to respond to requests for further advocacy beyond this. And know that I will try to answer any email, although I am not the fastest sometimes. But because there's a lot of
Can I
things going
also
on.
say that I have never met better advocates than parents and family of people with developmental disabilities. I said this to Lori. I said, boy, oh boy, if I was a legislator, I wouldn't want to tussle with you guys, because my view is that you have always fought for your child or your family member who's needed services. And it's been like that from the beginning, right? Like you went from, you know, here's your son or daughter to fight, you know, like it begins. And I've never met better advocates. And I would say that it's more important now than maybe, oh gosh, I don't want to be super dramatic, but it's super important now. Because you know, if you have questions, ask Lori the questions. I
just put my email in the chat, by the way.
And if you need it, and do it to the point where you can explain to a legislator how it impacts your family, the person you love, and the services that he or she receives, because that really is the bottom line. And legislators, some want to get in the weeds and some don't, but here's the bottom line. If your family member cannot get the services, who's going to care for that family member? Where is that family member going to be? And I know you all think about it, because I haven't met you individually, but I've met a lot of moms and I've met a lot of dads. And I had a mom tell me last week, again, I can't die because I don't know what's going to happen to my son. And that, I mean, I don't know any person, legislator or not, who couldn't understand that. And so you just have to be you, and you just got to tell them what you know and why it's so important. And we'll do the weeds. It's all good. We'll do the weeds. Because guess what? Those are unfun, and the legislators don't know them anyway. But you have to get the legislators to say, what is going on here? What have you done? That's, if you can get them to ask that question, that's exactly what we need to have happen.
We joined a really informative first meeting with our not your first meeting, our first meeting.
Yeah.
council.
This is a lot. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
lucky
wasn't
you.
working,
Welcome. You're
We're policy nuts. We're detail nuts. So we'll read
Oh,
the
I love it.
document and look at it all, and as emails come out with direct, I liked what you said about respecting the process, but we'll be kind of ready to plug in and engage when that time is right. I think we have a good story to tell, and I agree with that direct ask with the legislatures from constituents. It is really powerful. So
Right.
we'll polish our end of the storytelling on that.
awesome.
Yep, good.
I'm gonna go. Thank you, everybody. I have
Thanks,
my
Laura.
daughter in for the weekend, so
Thank you.
thanks so much.
Get some
Thanks, Laura, for
relaxation
all
in,
the
Laura.
work that you do downstate for all of our folks. We
Thank
appreciate it.
you. I hope
you
I
for the
save
good
you from never having to go there. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Thank you for the
And
good
Lori
explanation.
and I
your
do it
explanation.
together. We make it fun. So thank you though for all of you, and this is why we do it for
Yep.
you guys. So
Bye,
thanks.
Laura. Thanks.
Thanks for your
Bye.
time.
Nice to meet you.
All right, I'm gonna give us a 1 or 2 minutes here to anything else. Any other questions? I told somebody yesterday that I feel like I've been going through the stages of grief in all of this, right? So I started out like shocked, then I was angry, and then I was like bargaining, trying to figure out, should we really, or do we really deserve that? Should we ask for it back? What, on and on through the things. And then I'm, to the kind of resolve and acceptance stage of like, this is action that we need to, undertake, move forward, because this is as much for now as it is for the future, right? Because
Exactly.
We are so close to like moving towards and becoming what all of us dream of for our loved ones, right? That we can't allow this mistake, which is really kind of what they admitted to, this financially, you modeled the finances wrong. That's not our fault, right? That's your fault. You got to figure out how to fix it. So I think, I think that many of us have been going through this, and this is, as we've been trying to struggle with what is the right way to ask, what do we ask for, what is, fair and right. And, so having just heard this, as you like percolate and think of things, please let us know if you need email version of the document I put in chat, let me know. Anything else that we can do, let me know. And then keep an eye out if you're not signed up to get all of our emails, please sign up on them, and feel free to share this document far and wide, including on iPad if you so choose, or on our Facebook page as well. I really appreciate you all coming tonight. We're going to try to figure out a better way to remind people of this meeting. Jim and I were talking before we got on that the things that I thought we had in place based on the software we are using don't seem to really be working in that manner. So we'll see what else we can come up with to try to make sure that, because we generally have more than this on. So it just makes me think people are just forgetting or whatever.
Yeah, well, Lori, I think this meeting is really important information. So I'm going to send out an email to everybody in the morning and sort of say, you got to catch the recording on this. And here's the document that goes with it. And please, all of you out there, push it out to the folks that you know as well. So.
Like I said, Lori, I searched my emails and I found January's reminder of this meeting, but I couldn't find one for this meeting. That's why I contacted you.
Well, Zoom, that's the whole reason I went to Zoom, was because it could do registration, and it was supposed to send out a reminder 24 hours ahead of time to everybody who was registered. but it's obviously not doing that. So I'm not the techie person, so I gotta see if, you know, somebody can help me, figure out what the best way to do that is. Because I used to try to remind people, but like with this and so many other things on my mind, I don't always get it done right. And I need something that will help me get the reminder out rather than anything else. So I think I'll probably just beg Doug Maluski, our website and social media guy, to help me out. But I'll continue to work on that so that we can make sure that people are aware and have it you know, in their calendar and you know, are able to show up.
I did contact one regular attender and she's feeling under the weather. I said, I know you're usually here. She said, yeah, you know, her school kids got her sick. And so I said, if you can send that out, Jim, or whoever can send that out saying, hey, you know, sort of thing.
I'll send out that blast first thing in the morning. And Lori, you should know from all of us that we are really grateful for all the hard work you do downstate. You never sort of get acknowledged for that, and it is tireless work you do. So I'm grateful, and I know we all are.
Thank you. Thank you. It has been a very emotional. I can't tell you how emotional this has been. It's just, and I know that it is for you too, but like, you know, I don't have a loved one that I'm worried about their hours going, but you know, I'm care about all the people across the state of Illinois that are trying to you know, that this could just be so bad for, and we're just so much on the cusp of being better that it's I think that was what was especially hard about it, right?
Yeah.
Thank you all.
All right, everybody. We will see you next month.
Hopefully with better news. I hope it'll be a better, more uplifting meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, we need one of those socials soon.
Yeah, it's coming. I think it's in April, I think.
It is. It is. Yeah.
Okay,
everybody. Good night.
Bye.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for coming.